What's going on, everybody? D-Machine back to bring you another Ret Paladin video. In this video, I'm just going to give you guys a couple tips and tricks when it comes to being a Ret Paladin in PvP. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is Seal of Insight. Seal of Insight, it heals you for 5% every single time you melee swing someone. 5% of your health every single time you melee swing something. It's not a crazy amount, but I have survived quite a bit more when I use this. Now, they did change the animation in the global cooldown time of all our seals. Sort of like it's like the auras, like they were before. Now, if you see here, Seal of Insight is up extremely quick. There literally is no excuse not to use Seal of Insight when you're in that spot of wanting to survive. Now, I've used Seal of Insight in like duels against warriors or death knights, and it makes a world of difference against the melee when you're trying to continue to stay alive. Now, if you see that their burst is coming, you see that they're snaring you, you can't get away, you just gotta keep that holy power going and surviving, throw Seal of Insight up. You will survive much longer. Another thing I want to talk about is Justice, Fist of Justice versus Burden of Guilt. Now, Burden of Guilt is very good in Battlegrounds, but I prefer Fist of Justice in arenas. Now that 30-second cooldown versus the 1-minute cooldown is pretty huge, and the range is also very nice too, the 20-yard range. Burden of Guilt, closing that gap between your enemies in a battleground. I mean, battlegrounds are fun. That's plain and simple. It's not necessarily an arena where you're trying to just straight out win. So I love Burden of Guilt. I love closing that gap against other people. But Fist of Justice for arenas, I wouldn't go any other way. Another thing I want to talk about is Selfless Healer versus Sacred Shield. I have a lot of people saying Sacred Shield, it absorbs the damage that Selfless Healer would heal anyway, things like that, and you know, I just don't agree with that. The amount of global cooldowns that you'd need to put on yourself and the people around you consistently is just too much. For yourself, maybe it is, but Selfless Healer, when you're running with more than one person, which you will be in an arena, I would definitely go with Selfless Healer. If you watched my other videos, I've crit with Selfless Healer for like 120k, I non-crit for like 60k. People say that our off heals are enough with just Word of Glory. I mean, we do heal an awful lot with Word of Glory, but Selfless Healer, man, it just heals so much. I would never give up Selfless Healer for Sacred Shield, but that's just my play style. You could be completely different. But if you haven't tried Selfless Healer yet, I would definitely tell you to give it a shot. Another thing I want to explain is the constant damage of a Ret Paladin versus constant damage of, like, say, a warrior or another non-hybrid class that's there to do nothing but damage. Now, when our burst isn't up, we are not necessarily the best damage dealers in the game by far. So what I do, how I play personally, is I go for the kill often when my burst is up, and when my burst isn't up, I focus on utility, giving people freedom, sacrifices, and off heals and stuff like that until my burst is back up, usually in arena. Now, if I'm not doing that in a battleground, I'll go for the damage in a battleground, but you know, Ret Paladins, I've always played them as a utility over a main damage dealer. That's what works for me, and you know what, it worked very well for me. Another thing that I want to talk about is Inquisition. Now, before, it really was an option, but now it's 30% holy damage and 10% critical strike. Now, that's not necessarily an option. That is just too good. You gotta keep Inquisition up. That if you aren't keeping Inquisition up as often as you possibly can, then you're gonna see a very dramatic change in your damage if you start doing start keeping Inquisition up more often. So those are my tips, those are my tricks. Let me know if it helped you in any way. If it did, let me know. If you disagreed with something, just let me know. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thanks. Nothing you can do.